Welcome to the Hornets Hivecast, presented by Charlotte Eye, Ear, Nose, and Throat Associates, the official eye, ear, nose, and throat care provider of the Charlotte Hornets. Here's your host, Sam Farber.
We've got a special guest with us here today on the Hornets Hivecast. He is an analyst for FanDuel Sports Network, as well as does a great job covering the college game on the days that he's not covering the Hornets. Terrence Oglesby from FanDuel Sports Network here with us today. Terrence, thanks for joining me.
I appreciate you having me on, and I'm very appreciative that I get to be in this building, which I wasn't ever sure was going to be the case. But that all being said, happy to be here, excited for lottery season, excited to be here talking about it with you.
We're going to talk a little bit about what it means depending on the outcomes here for the Hornets. Got into a little bit earlier the percentages, the opportunity here for Charlotte to move up. It's a 14% chance of winning the lottery, roughly 50-50 to move into the top four, and the worst that the Hornets could finish in terms of the lowest spot they could draft would be seventh. But this is a special class by most experts' opinions. You cover the college game quite a bit this year, more than most. There are more players coming out of college than previous years where other things like G League Ignite used to exist. That doesn't anymore. So from your perspective, how good is the 2025 draft class?
I think you look at some of the recent seasons. Last year or 2 years ago, it was Wembanyama. Last year, you have Stephen Castle that ends up winning Rookie of the Year, but there wasn't that top-end talent that we're going to see in this year's draft class. In my opinion, the top 5 to 6 players in this class are as strong as it's been since 2003. And I say that without a whole lot of hesitation. You look at guys like Cooper Flagg. You look at guys like Ace Bailey, Dylan Harper. Some people are throwing VJ Edgecombe in the mix. Big fan of Trey Johnson down at Texas, what he was able to do. I'm really intrigued by the potential star power of this group, not just at number one. And Cooper Flagg gets a lot of attention because we are obviously in the Carolinas. But past that guy, you're looking at 5-6 guys that could be big-time players for each respective franchise and guys that could be all-stars in the future. And that's not something we've typically said over the last 4 or 5 seasons, especially past picks 1 through 3.
Put it into perspective, because obviously there have been superstar prospects, the LeBron James, Victor Wembanyama's of the world, but there are oftentimes, players that get a lot of buzz going into the draft, and compared to the next year's class or 3 years down the line, maybe they wouldn't have been picked in the same spot. So whether you want to take a pool of the last 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, how good are the players coming up in this class? How many of them maybe would have been the number 1 pick or a top 3 pick had they come out the year before, had the opportunity to?
Had they come out last year, I think there's potentially 4 players that could have been the number 1 pick in last year's draft. That's how good I think this draft is. Without naming names, I just go back to the potential star power and what you're able to see. I think Dylan Harper has real James Harden type of potential. He's 6'6", he's broad, he can do a lot of different things with the basketball, both from a scoring perspective and his ability to get his teammates involved. You look at Cooper Flagg, a jack of all trades. Defensively reminds me of a guy named Andre Kirilenko. You remember him. And offensively, he reminds me of Detroit Pistons version of Grant Hill. There's so many different players in this draft class that can make lasting impacts on an organization and be the best player on a team that makes it to an NBA championship. That's what I think sets this draft class apart, and if nothing else, puts franchises in position for something they can look forward to.
In terms of the immediate impact from the top of the draft, and that's really hard to judge because,
really hard,
quite frankly, even the best prospects don't often become franchise changers. You look at the example of, LeBron James, Victor Wembanyama, their teams in their rookie seasons didn't advance in the playoffs. You look at teams that did make big jumps this year, their rookies for the most part were either not in the rotation at all or had a much smaller role when they got into the NBA. So having an immediate impact is hard to judge. But when you're looking at the upper echelon of this draft, what do you see as the immediate role they could play?
In my opinion, Cooper Flagg immediately ready to play for whatever franchise. Dylan Harper immediately ready to contribute for whatever franchise. And then, for my 3 and 4, Ace Bailey, you talk about extremely high ceiling, but a floor could fall out too. So there is going to be risk involved past those first 2 picks as opposed to how high and how much production you're actually going to get throughout the course of a college career. Trey Johnson at Texas, kind of the same thing, a bona fide scorer at the college level, and I think it's going to translate, but there's going to be bumps along the way. Those guys are geared a certain way. They're geared to score. Well, when you translate to the NBA level, completely flips. You're going to have different defenders guarding you every night. The rules are slightly different. You look at Dillon and Cooper, what they're capable of being immediately from a physical standpoint. You know, Cooper Flagg, physically ready to compete right away. He was with Team USA last summer, helping LeBron and Steph Curry get ready for the Olympics. He was playing with Brandon Miller, of course. So you look at those top two guys, can they contribute and be ready-made NBA players right away? I say yes. Then you look at those next two who I just mentioned. I think there's going to be bumps in the road, but the potential of those guys, of Ace Bailey and Trey Johnson, is just a different level. And I didn't throw in Jeremiah Fears as well, out of Oklahoma, who reminds me a lot of a guy named Steve Francis that played ever so long ago for the Rockets and has spent time with the Magic. Kind of the same explosion, scores, but not necessarily a three-point shooter. Kind of a Monta Ellis type player as well with his speed. So you look at these different guys, how they can contribute, how quickly they can. There's going to be some variability and volatility in their production, especially when you talk about Ace, Trey, and Jeremiah, but the ceiling of those guys, tremendously high.
Terrence Oglesby of FanDuel Sports Network here with us today, breaking down some of the opportunities ahead for all of the teams in the lottery. I want to look a little deeper, and it never fails. It's not just the NBA draft. We just had the NFL draft as well. Everyone projects the number 1 or 2 or 3 picks to have these Hall of Fame careers, and then they start picking at flaws, and then it never fails. You get into the season, or you get 2 years into these guys' careers, and everyone's going back and has revisionist history and says, oh, actually it was the second round guy or this person later on who was the steal of the draft or the best player. One of the faces behind me here in Hornets history, Kemba Walker, picked 9th. He's the franchise's all-time leading scorer. So this is a draft where it's not just the top 1 or 2 players. You mentioned it's a deeper class than most that is projected to have an impact. One stat I looked up, from 1998 to 2022, every single draft class has had a player drafted 10th or later that ended up making an all-star team. Little unfair to judge the 2023 and 24 classes already, seeing as they've barely been in the NBA. And, oh, by the way, the class that broke that streak going back to 1997, it's the 9th overall pick, Tracy McGrady, who ended up being an all-star and eventually a Hall of Famer as well. So the lesson from all this is, as much as we might think we know about this class on draft day, the reality is there's likely to be a player or two drafted 10th or later who ends up making an all-star team. Makes it pretty favorable for the Hornets in the worst case, statistically speaking, in terms of the odds, or whoever is drafting 5th, 6th, 7th, to land a really good player in any draft. But in this class in particular, how much better are those odds?
I think you know what you're going to get in this draft class, and we were talking about it before we started this podcast. With only 106 early entry applicants in the fold this upcoming draft, it changes the dynamic of how you're drafting past 15, 16, 17, right? So you look at guys that you know the type of production you're going to get, like Neek Clifford at Colorado State, who was spectacular over the last 2 months of the season. You look at different guys that could float towards the second round. You're looking at older players. And whenever you look at older players, at least that's how it's looked at by NBA front offices, you're getting closer to a finished product than you would, say, drafting an 18, 19-year-old kid. So they say they don't improve much. I'm not really a buyer in that, because how long do you really need to play? I think you get 12 years out of a guy at the end of the first round. I think that's an absolute win. You look at Peyton Pritchard and what he was capable of doing. He played 4 years at Oregon. So they'll continue to improve. They'll continue. Maybe the top end isn't an all-star MVP level type deal, but you can get very good quality pieces towards the back end of this first round. And when you look at this year's draft class, and with all the older players in this draft class, you know what you're getting. So I would look at this draft as a little bit of a safer draft than in recent memory, because of not as many early entries, not a whole lot of freshmen and sophomore that you're gambling on towards the end of the first round, middle of the second. You know what you're getting, and you know the type of player that's going to come into your franchise.
And that certainly could come into play with the Hornets having 2 rather high second-round picks, which we'll see what the front office led by Jeff Peterson elects to do, either picking in those spots, moving those picks. There's a lot of opportunity, obviously, ahead here for the Hornets. Last question for you, just from a fan's perspective. Obviously, if the ping-pong balls fall the right way and Charlotte's picking number 1 overall, there's going to be a lot of excitement, as there would be in any class. But as you look at this class overall, regardless of where the Hornets fall, how excited should Charlotte fans be about adding a talent, anywhere it might land in those early first-round picks, from this class to the collection of talent that they already have in LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller and so on and so forth?
I think that's a big point right there, because really you look at, Miles Bridges has had to play out of position sometimes at the 4, and if you go a certain direction, you could get a little bit bigger and skilled. If you go another direction, you could add some ancillary playmaking beside LaMelo Ball. It just, you look at the talent level of these top 5, 6, 7 picks, and you're going to be able to plug and play with some of these younger players immediately. That excites me, and it also excites me with the growth and development. Brandon Miller misses more than back half of the season, but he showed flashes during his rookie campaign of being that guy who, if not a first option, could be a all-star level second option given that type of opportunity. So I look at both him, LaMelo, Mark Williams, Miles Bridges. You have that core here. Now you have to start building some depth around it, and I think this draft class is a perfect way to do that.
Terrence Oglesby, our expert today from FanDuel Sports Network, also covers the college game extensively. We'll see what happens on lottery night, and we'll look forward to the 2025 draft class panning out and see who gets to join us here in the Queen City.
That sounds good to me. Appreciate you.
Thank you for listening to the Hornets Hivecast, brought to you by Senta, the official eye, ear, nose, and throat care provider of the Charlotte Hornets. For more coverage, visit Hornets.com.